I could say I'm the incarnation of Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah, I like Afternoon, guys, or whatever time it is that you're watching this. We're here with the reincarnation of Satoshi Nakamoto, here to talk about the new crypto bill that's being introduced into Missouri.
First, I'd like to introduce ourselves. My name is Tark. It's my brother Yassine.
We're the hosts, and this is our guest.
Eapen Thampy. I'm a lobbyist here in Missouri.
Can you give us a little bit about who you are? And
We need the background.
Yeah, so I grew up in St. Louis. I went to Mizzou. I did econ and math, and then I got into the political world. First I got into wine business, and then I got into politics. I was one of the people...
Are those directly related?
Kind of, actually.
A good transition.
I began the movement to legalize marijuana in the state of Missouri in 2009, and that led me to become very directly involved in politics at the Missouri Capitol in Jefferson City. And in 2014, I got my first bill filed, which was agricultural hemp. And then the next year, I formally registered as a lobbyist and been taking on drug policy issues, criminal justice issues, and saw the opportunity this year to start pushing issues on cryptocurrency and blockchain. So here I am.
That's a great transition, because I was going to ask you, like, what ties do you have with, like, cryptocurrency in general? Like, when did you first introduced to it or get your opinions on it?
So a little over a decade ago, a very close friend of mine who's kind of my mentor introduced me to Bitcoin, right? He was mining Bitcoin, and he was like, this is the future, man. You gotta check this out. And I actually bought about $100 worth of Bitcoin back then, and my wallet was on a laptop, which got destroyed. So.
It seems like an odd coincidence. It happens to a lot of people who owned crypto before, and they just happen to lose it, you know?
Yeah.
It's weird.
So, but I've been following these issues for a long time. I was very excited by the fact that this allows us to completely decentralize our monetary system, and I was a big Ron Paul guy, about 10 years ago. So this is the fulfillment. Bitcoin is really the fulfillment of a lot of the things he was talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I remember, like, Milton Friedman, he was, like, I know another interview was saying, essentially describing, like, the future, what we need is a virtual currency. It allows us to transmit things without, as much regulation and stuff like that. Essentially, pretty much, discussing about Bitcoin technologies.
And we kind of see that now, especially with the bill that we're talking about, is that what Milton Friedman was saying is that it will cause states to start competing with each other now that they don't have that layer of control.
Yeah.
Do you see this bill being like the one step where,
It's a step, yeah. So this is Missouri House Bill 2792, I want to say. Mm-hmm. If I'm wrong about that, we can edit that, right?
Yeah, we're going to probably put a link in the description.
We'll put in the link, yeah. So what I've been doing is I've been watching what's been going on in Wyoming for a few years, right? So Wyoming has enacted 24 different bills that do everything from define blockchain assets and other things in their uniform commercial code to allowing DAOs to incorporate. So last September, so every September the Missouri General Assembly meets for one day in the fall to take up any bills that have been vetoed by the governor and say, consider if they want to override them. And I didn't have any bills that got overridden or got vetoed, but it's also a good time to show up at the Capitol and talk to the lawmakers and say, hey, what do you want to do next year? Right. So in September, I walk into State Representative Phil Cristofanelli's office, who's a friend of mine, and I was like, hey, you're an attorney. I know you're kind of on the cutting edge of some things. How do you feel about cryptocurrency legislation? And he actually had been talking to Caitlin Long from Avanti Bank. And he was like, yeah, I've had some conversations with some of the national groups about this. So it's like, okay, well, if you're willing to file a bill, let me kind of circle around, see if there's stakeholders who want to be part of this, see what they want to do, and get back to you with a proposal. And it took a little bit longer than I would have liked, but I talked to a lot of folks at the Kansas City Cryptocurrency Association and the Kansas City Bitcoin Club. And then there was a couple of groups here in St. Louis, and my good friend Austin Peterson. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Austin's got a Bitcoin club in Jefferson City, and then just talked to people all over the state, mostly on Facebook and Discord. And then my friend Mike Franco, who's the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Missouri said, "Hey, you gotta talk to the guys at Crypto World."
You get hooked up.
So what I did was I had come up with this document, and this document, you probably can't see it on the video, but I took 4 or 5 things that Wyoming had done in terms of money transmission, in terms of creating exemption for blockchain tokens from securities regulations, in terms of like incorporating DAOs. And I just put the bullet points of those bills in a document, and I linked to the Wyoming bills that had gotten enacted, right? And so I sent this document to Jeff Wade here at Crypto World, and about half an hour later, he calls me back. He's like, how do we get this done? And I was like, well, here's the process. Let's kind of talk. And so that led to a process where we did several phone calls. They came out to Kansas City to meet me. I have a congressional candidate I'm working with in Missouri who's been in crypto for about 6 years and wants to help repeal the 6050I provisions in the infrastructure bill when he gets elected to Congress. So,
Can you explain what that is?
So there's several things in the 6050I provision of the infrastructure bill, but one of the most offensive things that it does is that Congress is trying to commandeer anyone who transacts more than $10,000 worth of cryptocurrency, right? So they're like, hey, we want you to keep records of who you're selling to, or their name, address, and whatnot. And so it's which is kind of nuts. It's like I buy $20,000 worth of Bitcoin on Atomic Wallet. Is Atomic Wallet supposed to say, oh, I gotta figure out who this guy is if he's transacting domestically, right? And what if I'm using a VPN, right? So,
it's very difficult for somebody who wants to actually stay above board to keep track of everyone, and it really excludes them from doing a lot of work. Right, and so like and really the story between the 6050I provisions is it's all politics. The Democrats put that in the bill simply for scoring purposes because they wanted to say this is a revenue neutral bill. We're paying for everything. Well, this is how we're paying for it, right? So it was purely political as to why that got in there, right? But obviously we saw a huge uproar from the community about this. It was like, what the heck are you doing, right? Part of what I'm trying to do from the big picture scale is get people elected to Congress who not only understand the stakes and the technical aspects of this new space, but also have the ability to repeal these provisions and provide Americans with a stable and secure framework for this kind of innovation and developing these kind of technologies, right? And the candidate I'm working with, Taylor Burks, he's a Navy veteran. He did 3 tours. He's got a master's in supply chain logistics and a master's in accounting. And he actually kicked off his campaign by loaning his campaign 1.5 Bitcoin. If you hear him talk, he'll tell you that, like, look, Bitcoin specifically, Bitcoin adoption is a way for us to hold Congress to account for its reckless fiscal policies. Right. Because, and this is something that I think is getting a lot more traction right now because everyone in the country who puts food on a table is watching their fiat.
Diminished. I mean, like, officially 7.5% as of now.
I'm sure. I suspect it's in double digits.
Well, I mean, they excluded a lot of the things that they used to have in that record, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably higher, but at least 7.5, which is still insane.
Right, and
probably 30%.
Well, also, I mean, like specifically for people in Missouri, they already recognize that when they're calculating for inflation, they're looking to the perspective of somebody who is in the city, their lifestyle, and how they feel inflation. So people in Missouri, we have a far lower population density than like some place in New York or California. So it doesn't reflect us quite as closely when we feel inflation.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Another thing to ask,
what I wanted to ask is, before we start talking about the bill, is how do you see the favors being inside of like Missouri specifically?
Like I said, from the rural conservative point of view, we're trying to decentralize power from D.C. We're trying to reassert control over monetary system. We're trying to, these are things that are widely popular ideas. Right now. Once people, and these ideas have been kind of trickling down all over Missouri. You know, I talked to State Representative Travis Smith. His district is like on the Arkansas border. It's about as south as you get in Missouri, aside from the boot hole. But his son is mining, right? And they get it, right? They get that if you have the ability to have a strong currency, a hard currency that the Federal Reserve, that Congress can't inflate away the value of, that's something that is a tool for them to reassert their own individual financial sovereignty. That's a very attractive idea to someone who lives in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
Right? So these ideas are already out there, right? We're just trying to get everyone in the same place and do some more education so that everyone who doesn't understand what we're trying to do is, I mean, they're already on board with like the fundamentals here. But then in the cities, you know, I grew up here in St. Louis and I live in Kansas City now, but you think about, you know, the black community, right, where if you live north of Delmar or in St. Louis, or if you live east of Truce in Kansas City, you know, how many banks do you find there, right? So whether because of racism or just you know, willful ignorance, or you know, but these are communities that are chronically and historically underbanked, right? They don't have access to banking services, right? So and if you get a paycheck, right, and you don't have a bank, well, what are you doing? Well, you're going to a check cashing service, which takes 20 to 30% of your paycheck.
Yeah, they're pretty malicious, you know.
Right, you know, predatory almost, right? So, but you know, so in the black communities here in our urban areas, I'm seeing an explosion of Bitcoin and crypto adoption because, you know, suddenly with Bitcoin, right, you know, your cell phone is your wallet, it's your savings account. You can access sophisticated financial instruments. So you can, you know, the whole NFT thing is a big deal, right?
Like allows to bank the unbankable and stuff like that. These people who formerly didn't have these like modern financial institutions can now operate into like the financial system.
I'm joining the board of a nonprofit in Kansas City that does reentry services for women coming out of prison, right? And this is another population that is underbanked or unbanked, right? Because if you're a felon and you haven't been in society for a few years, like how difficult is it to get a bank account? It's pretty difficult.
Yeah. If people want to associate you with and everything like that, and the whole payment thing. So I definitely think this is definitely like a power for good, and like helping people who have been disenfranchised by our current financial system. Not just in Missouri, but also abroad. There's places where people just have no bank accounts. And places in America as well, where they have all their assets stored in their house, which could be stolen. Now they're concerned how much like cash they have on hand, because that's essentially they're all like, you know, living.
Yeah, I mean, look at Africa. You know, there's a lot of places in Africa had cell phones before they had landlines. Yeah. Right. Crypto adoption is exploding in Africa. Like, look at Nigeria.
So what opportunity do you think like this kind of bill passing will have to benefit like Missouri and the United States in general, being more pro-crypto?
So
with proper legislation.
So this bill is the point of this bill is to keep the government out of things as much as possible, while our innovators and have an opportunity or moving forward with new things, right? So we exempt cryptocurrency from property tax regulation. We exempt it from money transmission licensing requirements. We create definitions for the blockchain and digital assets and related things in our Uniform Commercial Code, which is the statute that defines all of our commercial transactions and gives a framework for all of the commercial transactions that happen interstate. And then we exempt blockchain tokens from securities regulations. Now, what we did, like I said, is I came up with these bullet points and came up with the relevant statutes in Wyoming, and I sent them to the and then I sent this to Representative Chris Finelli, and then he sent it to the drafting attorneys that work for the General Assembly. So we got this product back, right? So we got this bill back, and it's now what Wyoming did. Incorporated into Missouri's statutory form and relevant sections. But here's the thing, the attorneys don't necessarily understand all the ins and outs of these things, right? They don't have a technical understanding of the blockchain.
Yeah.
Right, so they just took the language that we gave them and turned it into something that's relevant to Missouri statute, right? So we got this bill back, and we just went ahead and filed it. But the other thing is, like, there's some things here that we need input on, right? So part of this process is just getting stakeholders on the same page and saying, okay, this line doesn't make sense, or this line is great, right? Or this thing needs to be changed, or this thing needs to be deleted. And we're just at the beginning of a process where, so first off, this bill's not going to be passed this year. This year is about us bringing stakeholders together, providing input to the legislature, providing education to the legislature, and hopefully next year coming forth with a product that's better and that has more understanding and more urgency behind it, and hopefully we can pass something, right?
Right, like connecting those that have the technical knowledge and are already really invested inside of the system and ecosystem with people that are actually, going to be working on the legislation and pretty much regulating this market.
Right, it's like that see it in Office Space where, the guys like, I talk to the engineers, I talk to the salesmen, right, and
make it work.
It's a thing, you have to facilitate a lot of communication. Wyoming, it took them 4 years to pass 24 different laws, and they're still, and they've got a first in the nation framework, but here in Missouri, it's going to take at least that long to just do the basic education, right?
Yeah.
So, we're at the start of a long road.
Right. Now, one of the segments that we wanted to bring highlight to was the one at the very end, section 4, pretty much.
Sure.
Where you're talking about exempting cryptocurrency developers or sellers from the sort of licensing that is required for everyone else that's inside of the financial institution. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a guy in western Missouri who was he had a business model where he would give him money, fiat money, and he'd send you Bitcoin, right? And he would do the whole education process with you and why you should be holding Bitcoin. Well, one day the FBI shows up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "I've got a Bitcoin adoption business, right, or whatever." Well, it turns out there's a federal statute that says if you're going to transmit any kind of financial instrument, well, you have to be registered as a money transmitter. Well, no one in the crypto world really thought about this 5 years ago, right? So he ended up getting prosecuted. Fortunately, he didn't go to prison. He got sentenced to probation because the judge was like, "Look, this guy doesn't have criminal intent. He might have technically violated a statute, but this is a new thing, and we don't really understand it right now."
Yeah.
So, and no harm was done. He wasn't trying to launder money for the cartel or anything. It was just like
You're just advocating for people to use it.
yeah. So, so the way I understand it is that the federal statute has a state law trigger. So it says that if you're registered with the state as a money transmitter, then we don't have a reason to talk to you. But if you're not registered with the state and you're transmitting money, then you're violating a federal statute. So this section is an attempt to say, okay, if you're using a virtual currency of any kind, then we don't have a requirement that you have a money transmitter license.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the more legislations that are going to help people make it much more fluid for them to transact. Because for people that want to get into it and just get a wallet and get $100 from their friend who already has a lot, as a means of education, it really puts up a barrier for that interaction that's so natural.
Yeah, the gray area right now in the state and federal law on this issue is it creates thankfully the federal government has, I think, because of the history on this has begun to approach this from a position of discretion, but they can change their minds.
Yeah.
And so we want to give more security to people who are adopting.
Right.
I guess that's it.
No. We also wanted to ask, just sort of to end on a positive note, what are your visions of the future, both in regards to cryptocurrencies, but in general, and is it a positive outlook or a negative outlook?
So, like any technology, I think there's potential for great good. I'm very excited for Bitcoin, particularly as a freedom technology, because this really does liberate people from an oppressive and corrupt monetary system. But I'm also very concerned about the metaverse turning into the Matrix. So what I kind of want to end with is I went with Jeff Wade here, the owner of Crypto World, to this weekend was the State Republican Lincoln Days, a statewide Republican convention that happens every year. And we talked to my friend Taylor Burks, who's the front runner for the Missouri's 4th Congressional District. We talked to Attorney General Eric Schmidt. We talked to Congressman Jason Smith. There's federal officials in Missouri are very interested in this, in understanding the subject. Some of them actually understand it, most of them don't. But the ones that don't have an interest in understanding what's going to happen. So, like, Congressman Jason Smith is a great example. So, he's a senior member of our congressional delegation. He is, I think, pegged to be the chairman of either the House Budget Committee or the House Ways and Means Committee, which deals with taxation, right? When the Republicans take over the House of Representatives next year, which is very likely to happen. So when that happens, Congressman Jason Smith is going to be a key person that we need to talk to and educate on some of the things that we want to change with respect to federal law, especially since the SEC and the CFTC is kind of beginning to try to grab power here, right?
Yeah.
But also in terms of repealing the 6050I infrastructure provisions that are very bad.
Yeah.
So Jason Smith is the key person that that crypto people in Missouri need to be educating and reaching out to. And fortunately, I think we've got some people not only in his district but in the state who have an interest in working with his office and doing that basic education to help him get this. And he's a very intelligent individual, but in Missouri, in the 4th Congressional District, Taylor Burks is our man. He gets it. He has a very good, comprehensive technical understanding of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And then in Southwest Missouri, in the 8th Congressional District, which Congressman Billy Long is giving up his seat to run for Senate. There's a candidate who's a state senator, Eric Burleson. And Eric Burleson, he's a state senator. He is a options trader by profession. He's also a software developer. Mm-hmm. So he codes blockchain. So
in nitty-gritty.
Yeah, he understands it in a way that you guys would be able to talk to him very directly. But he's also in politics, and I don't know where that race is, but he's probably one of the front runners. He's got a lot of endorsements. He's been very successful in fundraising. So, State Senator Eric Burleson from Springfield, who's running for U.S. Congress, he could be another key person in our congressional delegation who is able to articulate and educate from within Congress on this issue. And then I'm not making an endorsement right now in the Senate race because it's a very tricky situation and there's a lot of ins and outs there. But Missouri's Attorney General Eric Schmidt is pro-crypto. He is. We went and talked to him. I talked to him 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then we got to catch up with him. Jeff Wade and I got to catch up with him directly at Lincoln Days, and he said we need to talk. I'm interested in not only understanding more of the technical aspects of this, but so we have 3 federal candidates in Missouri for this November who I think could be very important to building the community nationally. In terms of going forward, and we have one sitting congressman who's going to be in a position of power next year who has a real ability to move the dial.
Yeah, this is like a grassroots movement of crypto in Missouri, and hopefully it'll float up to higher and higher.
Yeah, it's a great thing that we have pretty significant allies that are on our side on this subject, that also have that knowledge.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money in crypto. There's a lot of people who've been very successful. There's companies out there that are doing big things, Crypto.com, Swan Bitcoin, all these guys, right? So hopefully, one of the things I'm hoping to do with this video and future communications is, point to the fact that yes, we have the ability right now to move the dial in the Midwest and Missouri, right? And my job in the Missouri legislature finishes in mid-May. In mid-May the legislature finishes for the year, and after that it's campaign season. So one of the things I'm hoping to do from June through the election in November is drive all around Missouri, and not just Missouri, but potentially Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, because I've identified federal candidates in all of those states who I believe are reachable, if not already interested in the subject. So, I'm hoping that, crypto investors, companies, innovators help me with that and help become part of this movement.
All right, it's been a great talking with you. But before we let you go, for all this thoughtfulness you've given us and all this thought you've been putting into this bill, we have a gift for you. Over there is a golden Thinker 3D printed crypto statue.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
This is like the Bitcoin Rodon.
Yeah, exactly. Before we go, is there anywhere that they can follow with you or sort of keep up with the bill?
So you're going to post a link to the bill page,
Mhm.
right? So when this is posted, you'll be able to click the link to the bill page, and that'll show you the bill's progression. You'll be able to read bill documents, including the actual text, the bill summary. If there's any amendments made in committee or on the House floor, those will be attached with the votes, with the vote total on who voted yes and who voted no.
Right.
Now, you'll be able to connect with me through Crypto World because I'm, thanks to the foresight and interest of this company, I'm now working directly with them. So, and then my website as a lobbyist is greatstatestrategies.com. So you can,
We'll
click
probably
right
also
there.
include a link there in the description so you guys can follow along and keep up with the bill and hopefully find out and get involved in this.
All right, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. Pleasure's mine.
I guess that's it. What do we do when it's over? Do we
He said hit the space bar, I thought.
spacebar?